When a young man is kicked out on his 18th birthday, his cruel stepmother tells him his only inheritance is a worthless stone cellar on a forgotten patch of land. But what he discovered inside wasn't just about the past, it was the key to a future he never thought possible. If you've ever felt lost or underestimated, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button because we're about to go on a journey together, and I want you to be here for all of it. The key felt like a shard of ice in my hand. It was old, iron, and pitted with rust, the kind of key you see in movies right before someone unlocks a curse. Carol, my stepmother, dropped it into my palm without making eye contact. Her knuckles were white where she'd been gripping it. "Happy birthday, Leo," she said, her voice as thin and sharp as a razor wire. "You're an adult now. You're on your own." Those words weren't a celebration. They were an eviction notice. I stood in the hallway of the house I'd grown up in, a duffel bag slumped at my feet, containing everything I was allowed to take. 3 changes of clothes, a worn paperback my mom had given me, and a framed photo of the two of us, her arm around my skinny shoulders, both of us squinting in the sun. For the past 2 years, since my mom, Elena, had passed, this house had stopped feeling like a home. It had become a waiting room. I was waiting to turn 18. Carol was waiting to get rid of me. The wait was over. "This is your inheritance," she continued, pushing a thick, folded manila envelope into my chest. It felt heavy, final. "Your mother insisted. It's all in your name now." I didn't have to ask what it was. I knew the story, or the version of it Carol had always told. Years ago, my mom had spent the last of her savings on a tiny, useless plot of land hours away, up in the foothills of the Grayback Mountains. Carol called it Elena's Folly. It was, according to her, a half-acre of rocks, weeds, and the crumbling remains of an old stone root cellar. No house, no water, no value. It was a place where things went to be forgotten. "The deed is in there," Carol said, gesturing at the envelope, "and the key is for the cellar door. Not that there's anything inside worth locking up." Her lips tightened into a smirk, a small, cruel victory she couldn't hide. She saw this as the final punchline to a long, sad joke. My mother, the dreamer, had left her son a hole in the ground. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? Arguing with Carol was like punching water. It tired you out and changed nothing. I just looked past her, at the faint scuff mark on the wall where my headboard used to be. My room was already empty. She'd had movers come yesterday while I was at my part-time dishwashing job, the one I was about to lose because I no longer had a place to live. They'd taken my bed, my desk, everything that had belonged to my mom and dad, and put it in storage. For safekeeping, Carol had said, but we both knew it was just another way to erase me. I was the last piece of my mother left in her perfect, sterile house, and now I was being swept out with the dust. I clutched the envelope and the key. My knuckles ached. This was it, the sum total of my existence. A piece of paper, a rusty key, and a duffel bag. I looked at her one last time, trying to find a flicker of something, pity, regret, anything human. I found nothing. Her eyes were like polished stones. "The bus station is 3 miles east," she said, already turning away. "You should get going if you want to make the noon departure." Then she closed the door. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of my childhood ending. I stood on the porch for a long time, the cold morning air seeping into my thin jacket. The world felt enormous and completely indifferent. For 2 years, I had been living in a state of suspended grief, a quiet numbness that had kept me from falling apart after my mom died. Now the numbness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged fear. I had less than $200 in my pocket, saved from washing dishes at the Greasy Spoon. I had no friends I could stay with. We'd moved to this town for Carol's job right before my mom got sick, and I'd never really fit in. I had no family to call. It was just me, and a worthless stone cellar. I looked down at the key in my hand. It was heavy, real, a tangible link to my mother. She had insisted I have this. Why? Why this specific, useless thing? Carol had always painted my mom as a flighty, impractical woman who made bad decisions. Maybe this was proof she was right. But a tiny, stubborn part of me, a part that sounded a lot like my mother's voice, whispered, "There's a reason for everything, Leo. You just have to be willing to look." So with nowhere else to go, I shouldered my bag, shoved the key and the envelope deep into my pocket, and started walking east toward the bus station. Toward a hole in the ground that was now, for better or worse, the only home I had left. The 3-mile walk felt like 100. Every passing car was a reminder of my isolation. Families going to the grocery store, people heading to work, living their normal lives while mine had just been dismantled. The bus station was a small, grimy building that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The man behind the plexiglass window looked bored. "One ticket to Coulter's Pass," I said. It was the closest town to the property listed on the deed. He grunted, tapping at his keyboard. "That's a 4-hour ride. Bus leaves in 20. It'll be $68. I flinched. More than a third of my money gone, just to get to a place that might not even be habitable. I slid the crumpled bills under the glass, and he slid back a thin paper ticket. I found a hard plastic chair in the waiting area and finally opened the envelope. Inside was the official-looking deed, full of legal jargon I didn't understand. My name, Leonardo Vance, was typed neatly next to my mother's, Elena Vance. The property was listed as Lot 7, Ridgeback Trail. And underneath the deed was a smaller, sealed envelope made of thick, creamy paper. My name was written on the front in my mother's elegant, familiar cursive. My breath caught in my chest. A letter. She had left me a letter. My hands trembled as I held it. For 2 years I had longed to hear her voice, to get one more piece of her. And here it was. I wanted to tear it open right there, but I couldn't. It felt too private, too sacred for this grimy, impersonal place. I carefully tucked it back inside the larger envelope and zipped it into the inner pocket of my jacket, right over my heart. Whatever she had to say, I would read it at her folly. I would read it in the place she had chosen for me. The bus ride was a blur of gray highways and skeletal winter trees. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, watching the manicured suburbs of Carol's world dissolve into sprawling farmland, then into the rolling, untamed hills of the countryside. The bus was mostly empty, just a few other solitary travelers lost in their own thoughts. With every mile, the fear in my stomach began to mix with a strange, unfamiliar feeling, a flicker of possibility. I was scared, yes, but I was also free. Free from Carol's cold stares, her constant, unspoken judgment. Free from the ghost-filled house that was no longer mine. Out here, no one knew me. No one had any expectations. I could be anyone. I could fail completely, and no one would even notice. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. The bus wheezed to a stop in Coulter's Pass late in the afternoon. The town wasn't much more than a single main street with a gas station, a diner, a general store, and a few shuttered storefronts. The air was different here. Colder, cleaner, with the sharp scent of pine and damp earth. A sign at the edge of town said, "Population 412. I felt like I'd traveled back in time. I went into the general store, the bell over the door jingling cheerfully. An old woman with a kind, wrinkled face looked up from behind the counter. "Help you with something, hon?" she asked. "I'm looking for Ridgeback Trail," I said, my voice hoarse. "Is it far from here?" She squinted at me, taking in my city jacket and my duffel bag. "Ridgeback? Lord, no one's lived up that way in years. It's a good 5-mile walk, all uphill. You got a ride?" I shook my head. "No, ma'am." She frowned, a flicker of concern in her eyes. There's nothing up there but old foundations and poison oak. The road washes out in the spring. You sure you're in the right place?" "I think so," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I inherited some property." Her expression softened. "Oh, well, you'll need supplies then. It gets cold up there at night, real cold. And there ain't no power or running water." I spent another $30, a painful amount, on a cheap flashlight, a box of matches, a thick wool blanket, a jug of water, and some beef jerky. It felt like a pathetic arsenal against the wilderness. As I paid, the woman, whose name tag read Mabel, gave me a long, searching look. "You be careful up there, you hear? If you get into any trouble, you come on back down. We look after folks around here." Her kindness was so unexpected it almost made me cry. It was the first warmth I'd felt from a stranger all day. I thanked her and headed out, following her directions. The sun was already beginning to dip below the jagged peaks of the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The 5-mile walk was grueling. The road quickly turned from cracked asphalt to gravel, then to a rutted dirt track that climbed steeply into the woods. The air grew colder with every step. My bag felt like it was filled with rocks, and my lungs burned. Twice I had to stop, leaning against a tree to catch my breath, the silence of the forest pressing in on me. It was a deep, ancient silence, broken only by the rustle of wind in the bare branches and the distant cry of a hawk. I was completely, utterly alone. Just as the last light was fading from the sky, I saw it. A rusted, barely there mailbox leaning crookedly on a post, half swallowed by overgrown bushes. Faded letters spelled out, Lot 7. This was it. I pushed through a tangle of thorny vines and stepped onto the property. It was worse than I had imagined. Carol hadn't been exaggerating. The land was a chaotic mess of weeds, fallen branches, and jagged rocks. In the center of the clearing, almost invisible in the twilight, was a low mound of earth. As I got closer, I saw the dark, rectangular shape of a heavy wooden door set almost horizontally into the ground, secured with a thick, rusty chain and a massive padlock. The stone cellar. My inheritance. It looked less like a structure and more like a tomb. A wave of despair washed over me. This was a joke. A cruel, final joke played by the universe. I had spent my last dollars to come to a place where I would probably freeze to death before morning. I dropped my bag and sank to my knees, the cold, damp earth seeping through my jeans. The anger and fear I'd been holding back all day finally broke through, and I started to shake. I wasn't crying, not yet. It was something deeper, a raw, hopeless grief for my mom, for the life we should have had, for the utter mess my own life had become. What was I supposed to do now? Go back to town and beg for help from the kind old woman at the store? Spend my last $100 on a bus ticket to nowhere? Then I remembered the key. It was still in my pocket, cold and solid. And the letter, my mom's letter. I pulled out the flashlight, its beam cutting a weak circle in the gathering darkness. I walked to the cellar door and aimed the light at the padlock. It was ancient, covered in layers of rust and grime. It looked like it hadn't been opened in 100 years. I took out the key. It felt impossibly small and fragile compared to the hulking lock. I took a deep breath, the cold air stinging my lungs, and slid the key into the lock. It scraped and resisted. For a second, I thought it was the wrong one, that this was the final, locked door of my failure. I jiggled it, pushing harder. There was a horrible grinding sound, then a loud, satisfying click. The lock sprang open. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled the heavy chain free and grabbed the thick iron ring that served as a handle on the door. It was incredibly heavy. I had to plant my feet and pull with my entire body, my muscles screaming in protest. With a groan of splintering wood and scraping stone, the door lifted, opening a black, gaping hole in the earth. A wave of cold, musty air washed over me, smelling of damp soil, stone, and something else, something clean, like rain. I shone the flashlight into the darkness. A set of steep stone steps led down into the black. I hesitated for only a moment. This was my mother's last gift. I had to know why. Taking another deep breath, I clicked my flashlight back on, its beam a fragile sword against the oppressive dark, and started down the steps, one careful foot at a time, into the heart of my inheritance. The stone steps were slick with condensation, and I had to place one hand against the cold, rough-hewn wall to keep my balance. The air grew colder as I descended, but the musty smell was less pronounced down here, cleaner. The cellar was small, maybe 10 feet by 12. The walls were made of large, expertly fitted field stones, and the floor was packed earth, surprisingly dry. It was empty, just as Carol had predicted. Utterly, completely empty. My flashlight beam danced across the bare walls, the empty floor, the low, arched ceiling. My heart sank. This was it. A cold, empty stone box. My hope, a tiny, fragile flame, flickered and died. She had left me nothing. I sat down heavily on the bottom step, the flashlight beam aimed at my feet, creating a small circle of light in the profound darkness. The silence was absolute. I felt a crushing weight of disappointment, not just for myself, but for my mom. I had wanted to believe this place meant something, that her final act had a purpose. But it was just a hole. Carol was right. My mom, the woman who could find beauty in a cracked teacup and a wilted flower, had bought a useless, empty hole in the ground. I finally let myself cry. Not loud, racking sobs, but silent, hot tears that tracked down my cold cheeks. I cried for my mom. I cried for my lost home. I cried for the terrified, 18-year-old boy sitting in the dark, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually the tears stopped. I was just cold and tired. I was about to get up, to climb back out and face the freezing night, when the beam of my flashlight caught something. A flicker of something not stone on the far wall. I stood up and walked over, my boots crunching softly on the dirt floor. There, about a foot off the ground, was a single stone that was a slightly different color from the others, a paler shade of gray. It was also smoother, its edges less jagged. It looked out of place. My curiosity piqued. I ran my fingers over it. It was cold and solid. I pushed on it. Nothing. I tried to find a purchase on the edge with my fingernails, trying to pry it out. It wouldn't budge. It was fitted as tightly as all the others. I was about to give up when I noticed a small, dark line in the mortar just below it, a crack that wasn't there on any of the other stones. I knelt and examined it closely. It wasn't a crack. It was a tiny groove, deliberately carved. I traced it with my finger. It felt like a simple shape. A star. A 5-pointed star, just like the ones my mom used to doodle on napkins and the margins of her books. She called it her wishing star. A jolt went through me, a spark of electricity. This was a sign, a message from her. I pressed my thumb into the center of the star, pushing hard. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I felt a faint, deep thump from within the wall, and the stone shifted, sinking inward by half an inch. My breath hitched. I hooked my fingers around the edge and pulled. The stone slid out with surprising ease, revealing a dark, rectangular cavity behind it. It was a perfect, hollow space, just big enough to hold something. And it wasn't empty. Inside, nestled in the darkness, was a metal box. It was an old ammunition box, painted olive drab, with a sturdy latch on the front. It was heavy. I pulled it out and set it on the floor, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the latch. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. The inside was lined with what looked like waxed canvas to keep the contents dry. And resting on top was another envelope, identical to the one I had in my jacket. This one, however, just had a single word written on it in my mom's hand. "Read this one first." My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I carefully lifted the envelope out. Beneath it, the box was filled with more letters, bundled together with twine, and several thick, leather-bound journals. And under those, I could see the edges of what looked like stacks of money, held together with rubber bands. A lot of money. I ignored it for now. The money didn't matter as much as the words. I sat back down on the step, turned the flashlight to prop it up so it illuminated the space, and carefully opened the first letter. The paper was crisp, and the ink was a dark, steady blue. Her handwriting was as clear as if she'd written it yesterday. "My dearest Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, then it means I am gone, and it means you are 18. Happy birthday, my sweet boy. I am so sorry I can't be there to say it in person. I am sorry for so many things. I know you must be scared and confused. I know Carol has probably filled your head with stories about me, about this place. She never understood. I need you to listen now, to read this with an open heart and try to understand what I couldn't tell you when I was alive." I had to stop and take a deep, shuddering breath. It was her voice. I could hear it in my head, clear as day, a sound I thought I'd lost forever. I wiped my eyes on my sleeve and kept reading. "Carol thinks this land is worthless. In a way, she's right. The soil is rocky, you can't farm it, and it's too remote for a quick sale. I bought it for exactly those reasons. This place isn't an investment, Leo. It's a sanctuary. It's an escape hatch. I bought it a few months after your father died, when I realized the world wasn't as safe as I wanted it to be for you. Your father, he wasn't the simple man everyone thought he was. He had a complicated past, and he left behind some dangerous people who believed he owed them something. People who would not hesitate to come after his only son if they thought there was anything to gain. A cold dread trickled down my spine. My dad had died in a car accident when I was 5. That's all I'd ever been told. A simple, tragic accident. I spent years making sure we were invisible, the letter continued. Moving, changing jobs, never staying in one place too long. Marrying Carol's brother, and then after he passed, moving in with her. It was all part of it. A way to seem normal, to be part of a stable family, to hide in plain sight. But I always knew they might find us one day. So I found this place. I paid cash for it, using a different name. It's legally yours and mine, but the paper trail is buried deep. No one knows about it. This cellar, Leo, this is your fortress. It's small, it's hidden, and it's built like a bunker. The walls are 3 feet thick. No one can get in unless you let them. It's a place you can disappear to if you ever need to. I looked around the small stone room. It no longer felt like a tomb. It felt safe, solid, a fortress, just as she'd said. "I know it's not a home," she wrote. "Not yet, but it can be. In this box you will find everything you need to start. There are my journals. They will tell you the whole truth about your father, about our family, about things I was too scared to say out loud. Read them when you are ready. They will be difficult, but the truth is better than the lies. There is also money. It's every spare dollar I saved over 15 years. Money I hid from everyone, including Carol. It's not a fortune, but it should be enough. Enough to buy food, tools, a generator. Enough to give you a choice. And that, my love, is the most important thing I can give you, a choice." I reached into the box and my fingers brushed against the stacks of cash. I pulled one out. They were $100 bills. I quickly counted the stacks. There were 50 of them. $50,000. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It felt like a dream. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. There is one more thing, the letter concluded. The most important thing. This land isn't worthless, Leo. Not in the way people think. Look in the last journal, the one with the blue cover. I found something here, something special. Something that could build you a future, a real one, far away from the shadows of the past. But it comes with a responsibility. You have a choice to make. You can take the money and run, start a new life somewhere else, and I would not blame you. Or you can stay. You can build something here. You can honor the sanctuary I tried to create. The choice is yours, and yours alone. Whatever you decide, know this. I love you more than words can say. You are my greatest adventure, my brightest star. Be brave, be kind, and be happy. All my love, forever, Mom. I folded the letter, my hands shaking. The small dark cellar was no longer a prison. It was a beginning. My mother hadn't abandoned me. She had saved me. She had given me a fortress, a fortune, and a final mystery to solve. I looked at the journals, at the bundles of letters, at the promise of a future I hadn't dared to imagine an hour ago. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful, surging wave of love and determination. I wasn't just a lost kid anymore. I was my mother's son. And I had work to do. The first night in the cellar was the strangest of my life. I laid out the wool blanket Mabel had sold me on the dirt floor, using my duffel bag as a pillow. The $50,000, a brick of impossible hope, was tucked safely back in the ammunition box, the lid latched tight. I kept the flashlight on, its beam pointed at the ceiling, casting a soft, reassuring glow. It was cold, but the stone walls seemed to hold back the worst of the wind that I could hear howling faintly outside. Down here, the world felt distant, muted. I didn't read any more of the letters or journals that night. The first letter was enough to process. My mind was reeling, reshaping my entire life around this new, secret history. My father, the man I barely remembered, was not just a victim of a tragic accident. He was a man with a dangerous past. My mother, the woman I thought I knew completely, was a quiet warrior who had spent my entire life protecting me from ghosts I never knew existed. Every move we made, every cheap apartment we lived in, every time she told me to be quiet and not draw attention to myself, it all clicked into place. It wasn't about poverty or bad luck. It was about survival. Lying there in the silent, earthy darkness, I felt a profound sense of connection to her. She had been in this very room. She had chiseled that star into the mortar. She had stacked that money. She had written those letters with me in her mind. This wasn't a place of abandonment. It was the ultimate act of her love. I finally fell asleep, not with the cold dread of a homeless teenager, but with the heavy, purposeful exhaustion of a boy who had just been handed a map. I woke up at dawn, my body stiff and cold but my mind clear. The first order of business was to make a plan. My mom had given me the tools. Now I had to learn how to use them. I ate a few strips of beef jerky and drank some water. Then I climbed the steps and pushed open the heavy cellar door. The morning was beautiful. The sky was a crisp, brilliant blue, and the rising sun cast long shadows through the trees, making the frost on the dead leaves glitter like diamonds. The air was so clean it felt like I was breathing for the first time. The property still looked like a wreck, but now I saw it with new eyes. It wasn't a wasteland, it was a canvas. I spent the morning exploring the half-acre. It was on a gentle slope, thick with pine and oak trees. I found the remains of an old stone foundation, probably from the original farmhouse, now just a crumbling rectangle of rocks overgrown with moss. I found a stream at the bottom of the property, the water running clear and fast over smooth stones. This had to be my water source. My mom's letter mentioned something special she had found, I wondered if this was it. By midday, I knew I couldn't stay hidden in the cellar forever. I needed supplies, real supplies. I hid the ammo box back in its secret compartment, making sure the stone was secure, and then I took $2,000 from the stash, folded it carefully, and put it in my pocket. The money felt unreal, a heavy secret. Then I started the 5-mile walk back to Coulter's Pass. Walking downhill was much easier. When I walked back into Mabel's general store, the bell jingling, she looked up and her kind face broke into a relieved smile. "Well, look who's back from the mountain. I was worried about you, son. You make it through the night all right?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, a genuine smile on my face for what felt like the first time in years. "It was cold, but I'm okay. You were right, though. I need supplies." Over the next hour, Mabel became my guide. I told her I was planning on fixing up the old place, that it was a family project. I didn't tell her the whole truth, just enough to make sense. She didn't press for details. She seemed to understand that some stories are private. She helped me pick out a good quality sleeping bag, a small propane stove and fuel canisters, a cast iron skillet, a lantern, a heavy-duty axe, a shovel, and a bucket. I bought canned goods, beans, soup, tuna, and bags of rice and pasta. I bought coffee, a thermos, and a thick, warm coat. The bill came to over $600. I paid in cash, peeling off the $100 bills. Mabel's eyes widened slightly, but she just nodded and gave me a discreet smile. "Looks like you came prepared," was all she said. The biggest problem was getting it all back to the property. It was too much to carry. "You need a truck," Mabel stated plainly. "Old Man Hemlock rents out his old Ford for a fair price. He's usually down at the diner this time of day. Tell him I sent you." The diner was called the Corner Booth, and it smelled of bacon and coffee. An old man with a face like a road map and hands like gnarled oak roots was sitting in a booth by the window, nursing a cup of coffee. I introduced myself and told him Mabel had sent me. He looked me up and down, his gaze sharp and intelligent. "The boy from the old Vance place," he said. It wasn't a question. News traveled fast in a town of 412. "Need the truck?" "Yes, sir. Just for the afternoon." $50, and you fill the tank when you're done," he said. And that was that. The truck was a beat-up, rusty blue Ford that roared to life like an angry bear. But it ran. I loaded my supplies in the back and drove carefully back up the winding dirt road. Driving felt good. It felt like I was in control. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to things happening to me. I was making things happen. I was taking action. Back at the property, I unloaded everything into the cellar. It was starting to look less like an empty tomb and more like a base camp. I spent the rest of the afternoon working. I used the axe to clear the thorny brush away from the cellar entrance. I used the shovel to dig a small fire pit a safe distance away. I gathered fallen branches for firewood. The work was hard, physical, and deeply satisfying. Every swing of the axe, every shovelful of dirt, was a small victory against the chaos. As dusk began to fall, I made a fire. I cooked a can of beans in my new skillet over the flames. It was the best meal I had ever tasted. I sat by the fire, the warmth on my face, the stars beginning to appear in the vast, dark sky. The silence of the woods was no longer menacing. It felt peaceful, protective. Later, back in the cellar, warm in my new sleeping bag, I decided I was ready. I took out the journals. There were 5 of them, all bound in dark leather. The last one had a blue cover, just as she'd said. I started with the first one. I opened the cover, and once again, I was back with my mother. Her handwriting filled the pages, telling a story I never knew. She wrote about meeting my father, a charming, charismatic man named Daniel. She wrote about their whirlwind romance, and about the small, unsettling things she began to notice. The secrecy, the sudden trips, the men in dark suits who sometimes watched their apartment from across the street. She discovered the truth slowly, painfully. My father wasn't a salesman, as he'd claimed. He was a high-level accountant for a criminal organization. He wasn't a bad man, she insisted in her journal, just a man who had made a bad choice when he was young and had been trapped ever since. He had been trying to get out. He had been gathering evidence, planning to go to the authorities. But they found out. The car accident wasn't an accident. It was a message. They had made it look clean, but my mother knew. They had killed him to silence him, and they had let her know, in subtle, terrifying ways, that they knew she had a son. That was when her real mission began, protecting me. The journals were a chronicle of her fear and her resilience. She detailed every move, every decision, every dollar saved. She wrote about her loneliness and her fierce, all-consuming love for me. Reading it was like watching a movie of my own life, but from behind the curtain, seeing the hidden machinery that had kept me safe. It was heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. I read for hours until my eyes burned and the lantern's flame began to sputter. I cried a lot. I cried for the father I never got to know, a man more complex and tragic than I had ever imagined. And I cried for my mother, for the incredible, silent burden she had carried all those years, all for me. She had been the bravest person I had ever known, and I had never even realized it. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. I would wake up, make coffee on my little stove, and work outside until my muscles ached. I cleared more land, exposing the old farmhouse foundation. I found a spot for a small garden. I reinforced the cellar door with some new hinges I bought in town. I was building a life, one small, deliberate piece at a time. In the evenings, I would read. I finished the first 4 journals, a journey through my own hidden past. I learned about my grandparents, about my father's family, about the life my mother had given up to keep me safe. It was like finding the missing pieces of myself. I saved the blue journal for last, the one that held the final secret. One night, after a particularly long day of clearing rocks from the garden plot, I decided it was time. I made a fire, sat with my back against a log, and opened the blue journal. The entries were different from the others. They were less about the past and more about the future. They were filled with notes on geology, water tables, and local zoning laws. My mom had been doing research, a lot of it, and then I found the entry I was looking for. "I found it, Leo," she wrote. "I know why this land was so cheap, why no one ever wanted it. The old surveys are wrong. They missed it. The stream at the bottom of the hill, it's not just runoff, it's a spring. It comes from a deep, underground aquifer filtered through layers of limestone and volcanic rock. I had a sample tested, discreetly. The mineral content is unique. The water is incredibly pure. A geologist friend I consulted, without telling him the location, said that a spring like this is a geological rarity. He said a commercial bottling company would pay a fortune for the rights to it. I sat there, stunned, the journal resting in my lap. A spring. Not just any spring, but one that was commercially valuable. This was the inheritance. It wasn't just the money in the box. It was a sustainable future, a business, a legacy. She had included pages of her research, the water analysis reports, maps of the aquifer, copies of the faulty county surveys. She had even consulted a lawyer, a man named Arthur Gable in a nearby city, and had included his contact information. "He was a friend of your father's from before," she wrote. "He's one of the few people I trust. If you decide to do something with this, go to him. He'll know what to do. But be careful, Leo. If word gets out, the sharks will circle. People will try to take this from you." Carol's husband, before he passed, was involved in real estate development. Carol knows those people. If she ever suspects this land is valuable, she will come for it. That's why I let her believe it was worthless. That's why I need you to be smart. The crackle of the fire was the only sound. The weight of her discovery, of her trust in me, settled on my shoulders. It was a terrifying, exhilarating burden. She had given me a choice again, a much bigger one this time. I could sell the water rights, take the money, and disappear. It would be millions. More money than I could ever spend. A life of ease and anonymity. Or I could stay. I could fight. I could build the bottling company myself, create something from the ground up, just like she had wanted. It would be hard. It would be a battle. But it would be mine. It would be ours. Before I could even fully process the choice came to me. A few days later, as I was hauling water from the spring, I heard the sound of a vehicle coming up the dirt road. It was a sleek, black SUV, completely out of place in these woods. It pulled up near the clearing, and a man in an expensive suit got out. He looked around at my small, rustic setup, the fire pit, the wood pile, the cellar door, with a look of disdain. "Are you Leonardo Vance?" he asked, his voice smooth and cold. I nodded, my hand tightening on the handle of the bucket. "My name is Mr. Sterling. I represent a consortium of investors who are acquiring land in this area for a future development project. A luxury resort, actually." He gestured vaguely at the mountains. "Your stepmother, Carol, informed us that this parcel was recently transferred to you. Frankly, it's a worthless piece of land, but it's contiguous to a much larger plot we're purchasing, so for the sake of tidiness, we're prepared to make you an offer." He pulled a sleek leather portfolio from under his arm and opened it. "We'll give you $25,000. Cash. You sign the papers, and you can be on your way today." It's a generous offer, considering. It was a test. A lowball offer to see if I was as ignorant as they thought I was. I thought of my mom's warning. Carol had sent them. She must have gotten suspicious. Or maybe she just wanted to make sure I was truly gone, selling off the last piece of my mother's legacy for pocket change. And in that moment, my choice became crystal clear. The thought of this man, of Carol, of their sterile, money-driven world, paving over my mother's sanctuary to build a luxury resort, made me sick. This place was more than just land with valuable water. It was a testament to my mother's love. It was the only real home I had ever known. Selling it would be like selling her memory. "No," I said. My voice was quiet but steady. "Mr." Sterling raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry?" "The answer is no. The property is not for sale." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Son, let's be realistic. You're living in a hole in the ground. $25,000 is a ticket to a real life. Don't be a fool." "I'm not being a fool," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I'm home. Now this is private property. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." For a second, he looked genuinely shocked that I would stand up to him. His smooth facade cracked, and a flicker of annoyance showed in his eyes. He snapped his portfolio shut. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice laced with a threat. "That offer won't be on the table for long." He got back in his SUV, and it crunched its way back down the road, leaving a cloud of dust and the smell of exhaust in the clean mountain air. I stood there for a long time, my heart pounding. The first battle had been fought. I knew it wouldn't be the last. I went back to the cellar, pulled out the blue journal, and found the page with the lawyer's name. Arthur Gable. It was time to make a call. It took me 2 days to get up the nerve to call Mr. Gable. I had to walk back into town to use the payphone outside the general store. My hands were sweating as I dialed the number my mother had written down so long ago. A crisp, professional voice answered. "Gable and Associates." "I'd like to speak to Mr. Arthur Gable, please," I managed to say. "My name is Leo Vance. I'm Elena Vance's son." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence so profound I thought he might have hung up. Then, a man's voice, older and gravelly, came on the line. "This is Arthur Gable. Leo?" My God. I've been waiting for your call for a long time, son. We talked for over an hour. I told him everything, about turning 18, about Carol, about finding the cellar and the box. I told him about the journals and the money, and I told him about Mr. Sterling and the $25,000 offer. He listened patiently, only interrupting to ask a clarifying question here and there. When I was finished, he sighed, a heavy, weary sound. Elena was one of the smartest, bravest women I ever knew, he said. She was right to be cautious. The people your father was involved with, they don't just go away. And the development company Sterling works for is aggressive. They have a reputation for getting what they want, one way or another. What do I do? I asked, the fear creeping back in. First thing, he said, his voice firming up, becoming the lawyer my mother trusted. You do nothing. You don't talk to them again. You don't sign anything. You are to refer them to me. Second, I'm going to file a preliminary injunction to block any development surveys on your property and the surrounding area, citing potential environmental impact due to an unrecorded artesian spring. That will buy us some time. He already knew. My mom had told him everything. Third, he continued, I want you to get all of your mother's research, the water reports, the maps, everything, and bring it to my office. It's in the city, about a 2-hour drive from you. Can you do that? Yes, I said immediately. I can be there tomorrow. Good, he said. Don't worry about the money, Leo. Your mother set up a trust with me years ago to cover these legal costs. She thought of everything. Just get here safely. We have a fight ahead of us, but it's a fight we can win. I hung up the phone feeling like a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I had an ally, a powerful one. That night, I carefully packed all of my mother's research into my duffel bag. The next morning, I went to see Old Man Hemlock and rented his truck again, this time for the whole day. The drive to the city was strange. After weeks in the quiet solitude of the woods, the noise and the traffic were overwhelming. Mr. Gable's office was in a tall, old building with marble floors and dark wood paneling. He was a tall, stooped man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He looked at me, and I could see he was seeing my mother and father in my face. We spent the entire day going over the documents. He explained the legal strategy. We would use my mother's evidence to get the spring officially recognized and protected by the state. Then we would form a company, a small, independent bottling company, just as she had envisioned. It will be a long process, he warned me. Sterling's people will fight us. They'll try to bury us in paperwork. They might even try to intimidate you. I'm not scared of them, I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. This is too important. He smiled, a genuine, proud smile. You're your mother's son, all right. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The legal battle was exactly as Mr. Gable had predicted, slow, expensive, and frustrating. Sterling's company filed motion after motion, trying to dismiss our claims. But we had the truth on our side. We had my mother's meticulous research. While the lawyers fought in the city, I fought my own battles on the mountain. I used some of the money to buy a sturdy used pickup truck of my own. I bought tools, lumber, and bags of concrete. I started work on the old farmhouse foundation. I wasn't a builder, but I was a hard worker. I learned from books I got at the town library and from watching videos on the library's computer. I spent my days hauling rocks, mixing concrete, and slowly, painstakingly, framing a small cabin on the old foundation. It was back-breaking work, but I loved it. With every nail I hammered, I felt like I was building not just a house, but a future. I was taking my mother's dream and making it solid, making it real. The people in Coulter's Pass started to accept me. Mabel would always have a hot cup of coffee for me when I came in for supplies. Old Man Hemlock would wave as I drove past. They saw me not as some strange kid living in a hole, but as one of them, someone who was working the land, someone who was staying. One day, Mr. Gable called. His voice was tired but triumphant. "We won, Leo," he said. "The State Environmental Board ruled in our favor. The spring is officially a protected water source. Sterling's development project is dead in the water." I sat down hard on a pile of lumber, the phone pressed to my ear. Relief washed over me so powerfully my knees felt weak. We had done it. My mom had done it. Her foresight, her careful planning, had won. The victory was sweet, but I knew it was just the end of the beginning. Now the real work began, building a company. Mr. Gable helped me with the business plan, with navigating the permits and regulations. We decided to call it Elena's Spring. It felt right. It was her legacy, after all. A few months later, the first pieces of bottling equipment arrived on a flatbed truck, carefully navigating the narrow dirt road. I had hired a small crew from the town to help me build the bottling facility, a small, clean, efficient building nestled discreetly among the trees near the spring. We weren't going to be a massive corporation. Our plan was to be small, sustainable, and local, selling our pure mountain spring water to nearby towns and specialty stores. It was a business built on a principle of respect for the land, not exploitation. One evening, about a year after I first arrived, I was sitting on the porch of my nearly finished cabin. It was small, just a single room with a loft, but it was sturdy, and it was mine. I had built it with my own 2 hands. The fire pit glowed in the twilight, and the sound of the spring-fed stream trickled in the distance. I thought about the past year. I had arrived here a lost, scared kid with nothing but a key and a grudge. Now, I was a homeowner, a business owner. I was a part of a community. I had faced down a powerful corporation and won. But my greatest discovery wasn't the money or the valuable spring. It was the truth my mother had left for me in that cold, dark cellar. Her love was my real inheritance. Her strength was the foundation I was building my life on. This place, this folly, wasn't just a sanctuary from a dangerous past. It was a launching pad for a hopeful future. My mother hadn't just given me a place to hide. She had given me a place to grow. She had given me back to myself. I know there are people out there listening to this right now who feel like I did on my 18th birthday. Lost. Alone. Underestimated. Maybe someone has told you that what you have, or who you are, is worthless. I want you to listen to me. The most valuable things are often hidden. Sometimes you have to be willing to step into the dark, to open the box, to read the letter. The answers you're looking for might be buried in your own story, in the love and sacrifices of people who came before you. Your inheritance isn't about money or property. It's about the strength and resilience that's already inside you, waiting for you to claim it. This community we're building here, it's for everyone who has ever had to fight for their own happy ending. If this story resonated with you, if it gave you a little bit of hope, please click that subscribe button and join us. And go down to the comments and tell me about a time you found strength you didn't know you had. I read every single one, because your stories matter. You matter. And remember, sometimes the key to your future is hidden in the one place everyone else has told you to forget.